So one common thing that people find themselves looking for when it comes to fountain pens is actually not a stationary item per se. They're looking for an index card that is going to work well when you're writing on them with fountain pens. So today I have 5 different index cards to look at how they perform when it comes to writing on them with fountain pens. You've got everything from the budget card you're going to find in your grocery store up to a high-end 20 cents per card by Levenger. So let's take a look. Okay, so I just want to start by going over what note cards I'm going to be talking about in this video, and I have them in order here from left to right of least expensive to most expensive. Starting out, these are just the standard index cards that you probably used in school, the $3.09 package for 100 cards of Oxford that I got from Amazon, basic lined with a red line on the top for an index. The next ones are the Exacompta, which are $7 for this box of 100. Now these, there wasn't the one difference that you're going to see here is not all of these are the same ruling. Some I could only get in one ruling. If I could have gotten these in dot grid, I would have, but these are blank, but Exacompta. Next is the Natsu. Now this is a dot grid, and this is $8.99 for 100 cards of the dot grid. It's a thicker paper, and I'll talk about that later in the video of the different thicknesses. This is also a Natsu, but it's a specialized format where it has a to-do list on one side, and then on the back it has a small lined section with notes, and then a small dot grid section for sketching. And this comes in a note card system that I'll show when I get to these cards as I go through them individually, so be sure and stay tuned for that. And then the final one, I don't actually have a full package of these. I had a couple of them given to me for this video. These are actually the Levenger index cards, and these are actually $19.50 list price for 100 cards. So each one of these is pretty much a 20-cent index card, and you can see this has a kind of a blank section at the top and then a more defined dot grid versus the Natsu, which is a much lighter dot grid, so it's it has it there for your reference, but it's not going to stand out as much. So that's the 5 cards that I'm going to be talking about and going through the individual different tests. So let's move on and get started with the Oxford cards. Okay, so while I was in the process of editing this video, I caught a huge math mistake. It turns out that I was doing the math based off all of these being 100 count index card packs, not 50. So I'm not going to go refilm all of the individual card testing, but I wanted to pop in here and make the note that the Natsu cards are actually 18 cents a piece, and the Natsu to-do cards are actually 19 cents a piece. I am going to go on and make a different final wrap-up for this video that you'll see later on, but I wanted to pop in and make sure that I corrected that now that I found it during the editing process. Okay, so starting with the Oxford card, what I'm going to do is write with a couple of pens. This is the Diplomat Viper with Diamine writer's blood in it, an Ohto Rollerball, and then this is my wife's TWSBI Diamond 580 in Persian blue, and this has Iroshizuku Suyi-Gyoku in it, and this is a broad nib, so we'll get a broad nib, a fine medium, a 0.5 millimeter rollerball, and then I'm also going to do my glass dip nib with Iroshizuku Syun-Gyo and kind of color in to see, if there's any bleed through. So let's get started here. So this is the Oxford Heavyweight. I believe this comes in 2 different styles of index card, and this is 3 cents US per card. Okay, and then for the Ohto, it's going to kind of color as if we were doing an ink swatch, because if we're going to get any bleed through, this should do it. And we'll look at bleed through and show through, two separate things but related. So let's take a look. So no show through of any of them. As I said, this is the heavyweight card. Now, of the cards in the video today, this is the thinnest paper, the lightest weight. But overall, you know, there's no real feathering with the fine, medium, the broad, or the roller ball at the end. You get a little bit of feather, and I'll do a macro shot and put it in over while I'm talking here. There is a little bit of feather coming off of the rollerball, and a slight little bit, now that I'm looking a little closer, on the broad from a straight line. But overall, for 3 cents a card, this would be great for general use type notes or whatnot. So let's move on to the next one. Okay, so this is the Exacompta. And this is a blank on both sides. The Oxford did have lined on the back, as I showed in the first screen, but I'm trying to get as similar as a comparison as I can between these. Now I can already see when doing this glass dib here, there's a lot more of a surface bubble, if you will. Not a bubble, but the ink is sitting on the surface more. It's not absorbing in as quickly as it did with the Oxford card. So you can see, and I don't know if the camera is really showing it, but you can see from the glare, at least from my angle here, that it does have a little bit of a, you know, if I were to swipe my finger across that now, it would be quite a mess. So let's give that a second. But we should be able to check the back. So once again, no show through, which I wouldn't really expect because this is a thicker card. This is probably the second thickest, or you know, the Oxford is the thinnest, then this would be next. So it does kind of go in order of price per card, it seems, in terms of thickness. But overall, no show through, no bleed through. Slight little bit of feathering on the broad, probably very similar. And once I do side by side at the end with close-ups, we can really look. Okay, so these are the Natsu cards, Notsu or Natsu, I'm not exactly sure of the pronunciation. And these are dot grid, as you can see. And if it matters to you, this does have the brand and a date field at the bottom of one side. So we'll use that as the front of the card. We'll do here the Natsu dot grid. And these are 9 cents per card. And these are the cards that kind of gave me the idea for this video. I bought these a couple of weeks ago, and I've been using them in my mini field notebook from Lockbee, as well as the other card system. And I've really liked these. I liked the dot grid, and I like that the dot grid is nice and light. So it's there for giving reference, but it's not as if you're looking at a graph paper, if that makes sense. Okay. And I'm going to go on and do, since I'm doing the dip pen, do both of these cards here. The Natsu, I believe this is the same card stock between them. The only real difference is, you know, this being dot grid, and then this being a printed to-do list on this side, the notes field on the top here, and then a small dot grid section on the bottom. And these are scored in the middle. They're meant to be folded in half, so you could, you know, put notes and then fold it, put it in your wallet or in a pocket of a notebook or something like that. So let's go on and get this done for the ink there. And this is a kind of a matte texture. You might be able to hear that. I'm not sure if the mic is going to really pick that up, but it's got a different sound when using that, excuse me, that dip nib on there. it's not a slick card, so it seems like it would absorb a little bit better, and the absorption is a little bit better on these with more printing on it, and I don't know if that's due to the ink being on there, but this is the Natsu to do. And these are also, I believe, the same cost. If not, I'll put a little correction up below. Since we're really comparing the main index cards and these are the same card stock, they should be in a similar price point. Now, that being said, these do come as a pack of index cards, and these came as part of a system that has a box for organization that I'll show at the end of this. I'm not going to go too much into the details because that might end up being its own video per card. Okay, so I don't anticipate no show through on either of these. With that, this is probably let me see, is it truly the thickest? It is. The last one we'll be doing is this Levenger card, and I do believe it is slightly thicker than the Natsu. So let's go in and get started on that one. Okay, so here we have the Levenger. Now, this is dot grid, but it's a darker dot grid, and it has this blank spot at the top, and it does have Levenger.com inset on the bottom of what we'll consider the front. And these are the, I guess you would call the ultra premium index card, as these are 20 cents per card. It's $19.50 on the Levenger website for a pack of 100 of these cards. And that is quite the premium compared to these others. So that'll be one of the things to look at is it worth the extra 13 cents per card, or 11 cents per card to go with the Levenger over the Natsu or the Exacompta? That's going to be a hard sell, I would have to say. So we got that. Let's get this here. Okay, and then finally the dip nib. Now, this Levenger card does have what I would consider the slickest finish. Now, I know that is not any kind of technical term, but I think you would know what I'm talking about when you're feeling a paper. It doesn't have a matte finish, and it's not quite glossy. It's kind of a mixture in terms of the feel on your fingers. Now, we can already see, and if a 20-cent card was leaking through, that would be very disappointing. So no leak through. Overall, expected results for this being the highest end of the card. So let's get all these put together in a side-by-side and do some close-ups and really look through and see if we see any feathering or any differences. Okay, so just looking at these as they're sitting here, if someone were to walk up, I think the only thing they would really see just from a glance is that the different designs. This has to do and more printing on it. This is a darker dot grid. You'd have to look close to see the dot grid on this one versus these blank cards. So if you're using this for an appearance standpoint, you're not going to see any difference at a glancing view per se. Now let me get the macro put on and go through and get close-up shots of each of these, and let's see if we see any finer details that way. Okay, so when we're looking up close on the Oxford, you can see that line does kind of feather out a little bit, but is it enough to really make a difference? I would say no. Now on the broader nib, you can see that it's a lot thicker of a line, so that really does show some of the variation of the ink itself and thicken up, and then the ink swatch. So that's not bad for the Oxford. For 3 cents a card is kind of a throwaway note option. That'd be a hard one to pass up. Now on to the Exacompta. You can see that that line is a little bit more pronounced. It doesn't feather off as much from the fine medium of the Diplomat. The Rollerball is nice and, true to the line width throughout all of it. On the eye of sides, you see a little bit of feather there, not a ton. The Broad has about the same amount as the cheaper card, so, the thicker your nib, that's going to have a little bit more spread. That's just kind of an accepted thing. And then once again, the ink swatch, kind of standard. Okay, so now on to the Natsu dot grid. And you can see the grid pattern in there, and it's very subtle. So when that comes through, it's got it looks like a little bit thicker line potentially on the Diplomat, the top lines there. The Rollerball is pretty consistent throughout. The eye is really a good one to look at for a comparison between the ones. And that's just got the slightest little bit, and I think that's just because we're shooting so close, honestly. And then the Broad looks better than the others. It did not spread as much on this, so that's a good sign. And then ink test, you can really see those individual pin strokes of the dip nib on that one. And the Natsu to-do style, very similar, if not exact, as you would expect. Between the two, you can see each individual pin stroke there as well from the glass dip. So, aside from the printing, those are the exact same cards, at least in terms of what I'm seeing here. And then for the final, the Levenger, when you're looking at it up close even, I really don't see enough of a difference for me to consider purchasing these versus some of the others, like the Exacompta or the Natsu. And it looks like even on the Broad, it has a little bit more spread than it does on the others. And I personally don't like how dark the dots are. It kind of throws off from a visual standpoint for me. Have you found yourself looking for index cards to be able to use with your pins over time? Leave a comment and let me know. For the longest time, I was using the cheap ones before I knew better. Now that I found some other more fountain pen and stationary oriented index cards, I think that's going to be my direction for the future. But I'd love to know what you're using or what your plan is for index cards, if you use them at all when it comes to your pins. So let's get on to the Natsu system and show a couple of the different items that they offer to add to using index cards in your notes and stationary routines. Okay, so as I mentioned, just as kind of a bonus to show the Natsu, it has cards, but it's also a system of its own. I was looking at their website earlier, and there's some other options in addition to these, but this box is meant to be a divider where there's actually a magnet. You can see that'll grab in there, and this is meant to sit on your desk like this, and then you can have your to-do list that you're doing sitting there, and then it comes with these 3 dividers so you can file things if you need. It's got a open circle, a half circle, and a closed circle. So I guess there's probably a need open items, halfway in progress items, and then completed items. But you could make that whatever sorting system you would want to use. And then if you're traveling with this, you can put things in there. You can easily close this box back up and take it with you in your bag and not have your cards go out everywhere. So that's pretty nice. And this is something else that I got that I've actually been using this more than I ever thought I would. It's a card holder. So what I've been doing is taking a to-do list, and we've been using this around the house for like shopping list or to-do items, and you can just pop it in there, and then this is also a magnetic closure up top. That'll go on there, and then on the back, it has a pin loop, and this is where, because of the magnetic cap on the Diplomat, where you can easily pop it off, I've been carrying this around the house for reminders and to-do items. And then in the back, you can see I have a couple of the plain Natsu cards and then a couple of the to-do list cards to write notes down or ideas and things like that, where I don't necessarily want to be carrying a journal back and forth. And this is easy enough to take the card and put it into my Lockbee Mini or into one of my A5s or other journals. If I need to, I can use it as a bookmark. So that's been really handy. And when you get this, It does come with a small pack of the cards themselves for the to-do, so you're not, starting out with having to buy this and then buy cards separately. This comes with, I think, 100 cards in it. And then, as I believe I showed earlier, but you can buy just a plain set of the index cards. This is actually 50 cards versus 100. So, yeah, overall, it's a nice to have some variety. And as I mentioned on their website, they did have a landscape system as well with a different style box that I might look into getting. I want to use this more. I don't want to buy a bunch of stuff that I'm not going to end up using. And I'm using this enough now to justify it, but the landscape type card and format is interesting. And then they had some other planner items and whatnot. So that's one I'm going to keep an eye on to see if they release new things and see if it's something else that it might be worth getting in to use and try and maybe make a video on. So I just wanted to mention that as kind of a bonus in terms of the Natsu system. So when you factor in the performance of these various cards and their associated cost, 3 cents for an Oxford, where the rest of the more stationary specific are 18, 19, or 20 cents a card, it's you really have to separate it into two different camps. For a cheap throwaway, you don't need it does. For a cheap throwaway where you don't need any sort of longevity, like for a shopping list or to-do list, you're going to be fine with an Oxford card. You just have to go in knowing that with certain pins and ink combinations, you're going to face the effects of feathering or bleeding, and that's okay. Now, in terms of me going forward, I still really like the dot grid on the Natsu and the to-do style on the Natsu. So I think that's going to be the card that I will use going forward. I don't think I would go for Levenger. 1, they're not as easy to obtain. And 2, I like that the dot grid pattern on the Natsu cards is not as prominent as it is on the Levenger. That just kind of takes away from the cards for me when I'm going back to look at them and reference them after the fact. Okay, so that's going to wrap up this look at index cards when it comes to using them and their compatibility with fountain pens. I hope you found this helpful and that you have some takeaway items, and you might even have some new products to pick up yourself and add into your daily use. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing so you can see more videos as they're released, and thanks for watching.